Hello everyone, I'm Santiago, and today I'm gonna be testing the Batman Arkham franchise on the GeForce GT 1030. For FPS monitoring, I'll be using CAM. If you want to download the software, there's a link down in the description. And if you want to support me, there are Humble and Amazon affiliate links down in the description as well. So the Batman Arkham series, I'll be doing Batman Arkham Asylum, City, Origins, and Batman Arkham Knight. So if you want to skip to any of those games, check the description below. I left some timestamps so you can skip to whatever you want. So well, first of all, we are starting with Batman Arkham Asylum, and I'm going to be using the maximum settings on 1080p, since when I tried 1440p, the game was dropping below 60 frames per second. But if you don't care about the frame rate, just do 1440p, you'll be fine, over 30 frames per second. And I also enabled PhysX, which is the NVidia GameWorks stuff on this game. I only enabled it on this game because it's the only one that isn't broken, for saying it some way. The performance here is fine. And yeah, the game stays over 60 frames per second most of the time. When you're loading a new area for the first time, it might drop to 45 for a second because it's streaming stuff from the hard drive. But other than that, it's not really much of a problem, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. But yeah, this one runs fine. I'll speak to you again on Batman Arkham City.
Don't let him hit you, idiot!
Anyone seen the big bad bat? I warn you, he may look like an idiot and talk like an idiot, but don't let that fool you. He really is an idiot.
Hey, scram, bats! This is my me time.
Where's Gordon?
Wouldn't you like
I'm
to
over
know?
here!
Shut up!
Ah! You crazy bitch!
Harley!
Ah!
What's he doing here? It's too early!
I'm sorry, Puddin'. Don't be angry with me. Mwah!
I can never sit that.
Sorry, B-Man. You'll have to find another way. Goodbye now.
I want all the doctors rounded up. Search every inch of the medical building. I mean it. Search every room, every office, and every trash can. If another doctor tries to run and get out of the building, then you won't. I'll just flood the rooms with happy gas and leave you to die. Hell, I may do that anyway. Sounds fun.
Get off of me.
Shut it! and Get down there with the others! Move it!
Okay, I hear you. I'm going.
Why does he need the doctors? I've got to save them.
any one of you when you die.
Please, let us go.
Run out! Find him! Man down! Man down!
Okay guys, now I'm testing Batman Arkham City, and once again 1080p, because anything higher drops the frame rate below 60. And well, this game was the first one in this series to introduce DirectX 11, and in this one DirectX 11 is not that well optimized, or it just uses a lot of GPU. I remember having a ton of issues with this game on DirectX 11 back then when it was first released, so I just turned off DirectX 11 features, used FXAA, and the rest cranked up to the max except in PhysX, which I turned off because on this game PhysX is kinda broken. At least on my end it caused a lot of stutter, even on higher end GPUs. Well, with the maximum settings, no DirectX 11, no PhysX, the game is pretty much at over 60 frames per second all the time, not much of a problem. The GPU usage is close to the maximum on the worst cases, but it doesn't seem to be enough to drop below 60, which is a good thing. But yeah, with this configuration it's completely playable. If you use DirectX 11, expect around 40 to 45 frames per second.
Why is it always snowing in here? Is it because of Mr. Freeze?
Out! It's Batman!
I'm telling you, Batman.
What's the Bat doing here?
There's a fight going on over there.
Your mother!
Down here freezing, while strangers up in his nice warm tower. Bastard!
Look out! Batman's here!
Swear to God, if I ever see Hugo Strange, he's a dead man. So that's the plan. Yep. I ain't so sure. For the love of... Look, we've been through this. We find Bruce Wayne.
Heard? It's the freaking Bat!
Someone's fighting over here!
Now I'm testing Batman Arkham Origins. I'm going to be doing once again 1080p like on the previous games, and well, this time around I enabled a couple of DirectX 11 features such as geometry detail and dynamic shadows. That allows us to be over 60 frames per second most of the time, but on very specific places where there are many lights you'll see it drops to 45 frames per second. In order to get rid of that problem, just lower geometry detail and dynamic shadows from DX11 enhanced to high or normal. I don't remember which one is before DirectX 11 in this game, but the game still looks fine. Yes, a little less detail, less tessellation, lower resolution shadows, but it stays over 60 frames per second that way. And here again I turn off physics because it's a big hit to the frame rate.
They're fighting a bat. I had enough of you. Don't hurt me. I had a trouble. I can take anything you can dish out. Give me a break, will ya?
Department's wrong about you. I knew it.
Gotta be my lucky.
And finally, Batman Arkham Knight. I'm going to be doing 1080p with the minimum settings, and you'll see that when I'm driving the Batmobile, the frame rate is below 30 frames per second quite a bit, so it drops below 30 when I'm driving around or just moving very fast through the map or destroying stuff with the Batmobile, which is not really that good to see. I recommend overclocking the GT 1030 if you want closer to 30 frames per second. Fighting on the ground is not really that bad, it stays over 30, but again, when moving around it's kind of a mess, so I decided to also test 900p. On that resolution I was able to crank up the shadows and level of detail from low to normal, and I stay over 30 frames per second even while moving on the Batmobile. You might see a couple drops to 26 frames per second when I'm crashing against a lot of stuff, but it's not really a deal breaker to me, at least in my opinion. But yeah, on this one it's not possible to get 60 frames per second for what I could see, plus it wasn't a good PC port to begin with. But anyway guys, that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed this video, thanks for watching and see you next time.
Bat's got a cannon on his car. He's kicking ass. It's Batman. Get after him. Go!
I've been waiting for a shot at you, Batman.
Batman's old car. You know, it had a kind of You want to take the wheel? Damn it! Get out! Go!